At 51, I thought I had it all. A Manhattan penthouse, a corner office overlooking the skyline, and a reputation as the guy who could close any deal. My calendar was booked months in advance. My kids? I figured I'd catch up with them once the merger was done. My wife? She knew I loved her. Surely the money proved that. Then, one Thursday afternoon, right after I shook hands on a $14 million deal, I checked my phone. 20 missed calls. One text from my wife. "We're gone. Don't bother coming home." In that moment, my world split open. I'd spent 2 decades building an empire, but I couldn't remember the last time I tucked my daughter in or watched my son's soccer game. I could recall every fiscal quarter's revenue, just not my wife's birthday. I could recite our company mission, but I no longer knew my family's. The penthouse echoed with silence that night. I sat alone in a kitchen no one cooked in, staring at a fridge covered in kids' drawings I hadn't noticed. It hit me. I had achieved everything I wanted, except the only thing that mattered. What happened next wasn't easy. It wasn't a single grand gesture or a movie-style reunion. It was failure, humility, and 1,000 small attempts to rebuild the bridges I'd burned. If you've ever wondered whether it's too late to choose your family over your ambition, this story is for you. Because sometimes losing everything is the only way to find out what really matters. I still remember the way my daughter's face lit up on her 5th birthday, when we turned off the lights and brought out the cake. The candles flickered against her cheeks, and the sound of our off-key "Happy Birthday" echoed through the kitchen. My wife, Laura, held the camera, laughing as frosting smudged across our son's nose. I stood behind the cake, arms wide, smiling bigger than anyone else in the room. Back then, our world was small, warm, and perfect. We didn't have much. An old colonial in upstate New York, one shared car, secondhand furniture. But we had each other, and to me that meant everything. I wasn't the man I would become yet. I was just a guy with a cheap suit, a community college degree, and a fire in my gut that said, "We're gonna make it." I'd met Laura during night classes when I was 22. She was studying early childhood education. I was juggling coursework, a warehouse job, and taking care of my younger brother. She said I had tired eyes but a good heart. I asked her out over a shared vending machine coffee, and we were married 2 years later. Our love wasn't flashy, but it was honest. We whispered dreams late at night. Her own daycare someday, maybe 2 kids, a house with a porch swing. I promised her those things. I swore I'd build a life she'd never want to leave, that I'd be the man her father never was, the father mine had never been. When our first child, Jackson, was born, I was making $48,000 a year as a junior analyst at a small investment firm. I was the youngest guy on the floor, always the first in and last to leave. When I wasn't working, I was reading financial reports by lamplight, studying the way markets moved like waves. Laura would fall asleep with her head on my shoulder while I highlighted margins in yellow. By the time our daughter Emily arrived, I was earning 6 figures and driving a used Lexus. It wasn't glamorous, but it was momentum. Every bonus went toward upgrading our life. Better health care, a newer crib, family insurance. And yet, every decision came with a whisper in the back of my mind. Soon, I'll be home more. Just a bit more time. Laura was a miracle in those years. She somehow managed to raise 2 babies, work part-time at a local preschool, cook meals, and still make me feel like I wasn't missing anything. She always said, "You're working hard for us. I see it." And that meant more to me than she knew. But it was that 5th birthday that sticks with me, because that was the last year everything felt whole. That night, after the cake and the gifts, Laura and I sat on the porch swing I'd finally installed. She leaned into me and said, "We're really doing it, huh?" I squeezed her hand and nodded. This is just the beginning. I didn't know then how true that was, or how differently that beginning would unfold. At work, I had just been promoted to senior associate. My name started appearing in meetings with real estate developers and hedge fund managers. I was invited to lunches in Midtown Manhattan, introduced to men who wore watches worth more than our house. They liked my hunger, my hustle. "Kids got something," they'd say, and I believed them. I began to travel more. First, day trips to Boston, then overnights in Chicago, then a full week in Dubai. I told myself it was temporary, that every trip was one step closer to the life Laura and I had dreamed of. Still, I tried to stay present. I FaceTimed the kids from airports, brought home toys from each city. Laura made a map on the fridge with pins for every place Daddy visited. Jackson would run to show me his math tests. Emily would sit on my lap, brushing my hair with her little fingers while babbling about her dolls. I didn't see the cracks forming, or maybe I chose not to. All I saw was a staircase and I was climbing. When we moved into a new 4-bedroom house near the Hudson, I felt like I'd finally arrived. Hardwood floors, a backyard, a bonus room I turned into an office. I bought Laura the porch swing she'd always wanted, this time one that cost 3 times more than the first. I installed it without help. She smiled when she saw it, but there was something behind her eyes I couldn't quite read. That night, we celebrated with pizza on the floor. The kids built forts out of moving boxes. Laura leaned against me, just like before. But her head felt heavier, her silence longer. And for the first time, I wondered if the climb had taken something I didn't notice. Still, I pushed that thought aside. "This is just the beginning," I said again. And it was. Just not the one I'd expected. The first crack didn't feel like a break. It felt like a shrug. It was a Tuesday morning in late May, and I was standing in a glass conference room on the 42nd floor, pitching a multi-million-dollar portfolio restructure to 3 stone-faced clients from Zurich. The Manhattan skyline gleamed behind me, and every word I spoke carried weight. My suit was pressed, my pitch rehearsed to perfection, and by all accounts, I was crushing it. But my mind kept drifting. Emily's preschool graduation was happening at that exact moment. Tiny gowns, construction paper diplomas, out-of-tune singing, those little rituals that meant the world to 5-year-olds and their mothers. Laura had reminded me twice that week. "It's at 10 a.m., James. Don't forget. Emily really wants you there." I promised I'd try. What I meant was, I wouldn't. After the meeting, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Laura, 1 text, "We saved you a seat." I stared at the message longer than I should have. I started typing, then erased it. What could I say? "Sorry, landed a client worth 7 figures?" Instead, I slid the phone back into my jacket and returned to the boardroom to celebrate. That night, when I got home, the house was quiet. Laura was in the kitchen cleaning up streamers and cupcake wrappers. Emily's cap sat on the counter, glittery and wrinkled. "How'd it go?" I asked, setting down my briefcase. She didn't look up. "She was looking for you the whole time." I opened my mouth, closed it, walked over to hug her, but she pulled away. She sang a song, off-key but loud. "Jackson filmed it for you." I nodded, but something inside me twisted. I had closed the deal. The firm was thrilled, but my daughter had stood on stage and scanned the crowd for a face that wasn't there. Later, as I tucked Emily in, she handed me a drawing. 3 stick figures. Mommy, Jackson, her. Underneath, she'd written in big block letters, family. I smiled. Where's Daddy? She pointed to the corner of the page, a faint gray outline. No features, just a shadow. That's you, she whispered. You're always at work, so I made you a ghost. The words hit harder than any market crash. I laughed awkwardly, ruffled her hair, told her I loved it. But in the bathroom, I sat on the edge of the tub, staring at the tile, wondering when my daughter had started drawing me in shades of absence. Laura didn't bring it up. That was her way. Silence that screamed. She still packed my lunches, still smiled when I got home, but her eyes didn't linger like they used to. Her voice no longer lifted at the end of sentences. We stopped watching shows together. Dinners grew shorter. Conversations grew stale. She'd ask how my day was. I'd recite a list of meetings and revenue forecasts. I'd ask about hers, she'd say, same. And that was that. At work, things couldn't have been better. I got a corner office, a raise, mentions in industry articles. My team called me the closer. I'd walk through those glass doors every morning feeling like a man on fire. But at home, I was slowly becoming smoke. Jackson stopped showing me his tests. Emily stopped drawing altogether. They still hugged me, still called me Dad, but their voices carried a polite distance, like I was a guest they liked but didn't know well. I didn't realize it then, but I'd become fluent in rationalization. I'm doing this for them. They'll understand when they're older. I'll make it up next weekend. One more deal, then I slow down. But weekends filled up. Clients called, flights booked, and the guilt was always there, lurking behind every missed bedtime and every rushed breakfast. Then came the evening I found Laura sitting in our bedroom, folding laundry in silence. You okay? I asked. She nodded, but then she held up a small red dress. Emily wore this today, she said. She said she missed you during recess. I sat down next to her. She misses you when she gets an A, when she falls down, when she can't sleep. She misses you in the little moments, James. Not just birthdays or graduations, the little ones. I looked at the dress. I didn't remember buying it, didn't remember seeing her wear it. That night I couldn't sleep, because I was starting to understand the truth. They didn't need me to be a superhero. They never asked for a mansion, or a perfect Christmas, or a dad who juggled time zones. They just wanted me. In the room. On the floor with Lego bricks. At the table during dinner. On the bleachers during a kindergarten song. And somehow, I had confused providing for them with being there for them. I thought love was sacrifice. That if I worked hard enough, earned enough, built enough, they'd know I cared. But I was building a fortress while they were looking for a bridge. And somewhere along the line, I had started handing them blueprints instead of myself. After the preschool graduation debacle, I tried to make it right. Summer was approaching, and I figured a family vacation would fix things. That's what people did, right? You mess up, you make it up with palm trees and room service. I booked a luxury suite at a 5-star resort in the Florida Keys. Private beach, kids club, spa packages, the works. When I told Laura, she blinked twice. You want to take time off? I nodded. A full week, just us, no meetings, no work. She hesitated, then smiled faintly. Okay. I took that as a win. The flight was fine. The kids were quiet, heads buried in tablets. Laura read a book, something by Joan Didion, I think. I watched the clouds drift by and imagined this was the beginning of a new chapter. But from the moment we checked in, It was clear something had shifted. At dinner the first night, I tried to make conversation. "How's school going, Jackson?" He shrugged, eyes glued to his switch. "Fine." "Emily?" She pushed pasta around her plate. "Okay." Laura smiled at the waiter, ordered wine, and spent most of the evening checking her phone. She said she was texting her sister. Maybe she was. Maybe not. I suggested we all go paddleboarding the next day. Laura declined, said her back was stiff. The kids said it sounded boring. I ended up going alone, slicing across the turquoise water with nothing but my thoughts and the gnawing sense that the distance between us wasn't just metaphorical anymore. Back at the pool, I watched my family exist around me, not with me. Jackson lounged under an umbrella, gaming headset on. Emily built sandcastles near the edge of the beach, not once looking up. Laura sat in a shaded cabana, sunglasses on, phone in hand. That night, I asked Laura if she was okay. "I'm tired," she said simply. "Tired of what?" She didn't answer. I didn't press. I thought maybe I could change the mood, so I scheduled a family photo session with the resort photographer. Coordinated outfits, sunset on the beach, the whole cliché. We stood on the shore, waves lapping at our feet. The photographer directed us. "Everyone look at Dad! Big smiles!" Jackson gave a half smirk. Emily stared off to the side. Laura didn't even pretend. Her smile was tight, distant, like someone posing for a stranger. When I saw the final photo later that night, I paused. All four of us were in frame, standing close. Technically, a family. But not one of us was looking at the same place. Not one set of eyes connected. It looked like a brochure ad, beautiful on the surface, empty underneath. Back in the room, Emily asked if she could sleep over at her friend Mia's when we got back home. "I don't want to be at the house this weekend," she added casually, coloring on the hotel notepad. I raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" She didn't look up. "It's too loud. You and Mom always talk angry now." I swallowed. "We're just having grown-up conversations sometimes." She nodded like that made sense. But then she said, "Mia's house is quiet. Her parents don't yell." I stared at her, suddenly more ashamed than I'd ever been. Later that night, after the kids fell asleep, I stepped out onto the balcony. Laura joined me, silent. We listened to the waves crash against the shore, pretending we were still capable of shared silence. "Do you think this helped?" I asked finally. She didn't answer right away. "I think it helped me see things clearer." "Like what?" She turned toward me, her face unreadable in the moonlight. "That sometimes space can be more revealing than closeness." I didn't know what to say. She walked back inside, leaving me alone with 1,000 questions and no answers. By the time we flew home, I had convinced myself things weren't that bad. I told myself the vacation was just off, wrong timing, jet lag, Mercury in retrograde. Whatever excuse I needed to avoid the truth. But the truth was this. I had tried to buy back connection with luxury. I had mistaken logistics for intimacy. I had scheduled love like a meeting and expected it to show up on command. My family didn't need a suite with ocean views. They needed eye contact, uninterrupted sentences, laughter not sandwiched between calendar alerts. And what I offered them, even with all my money and intention, was a version of myself filtered through ambition and apology. We had shared a vacation, but we were still living parallel lives. It came in an email, not a conversation, not a note slipped under my coffee mug. An actual, formatted email. Subject line, us. I opened it between meetings. At first, I thought it was a reminder for a dentist appointment or something the kids needed, but it wasn't logistics. It wasn't about dinner plans or dry cleaning or Jackson's science project. It was about her and us. If this merger closes, the first line read, I'll close the door. I read the sentence 3 times before continuing. The email wasn't angry. It was clinical, measured, like she'd written it a dozen times before hitting send. You've asked us to wait. For years. For you to get past this deal or finish this phase or lock in this bonus. And we have. I have. I've defended you to the kids. I've carried our life on the days you were a ghost. But I can't anymore. She didn't sign it with love, just her name. Laura. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen as if her words might shift into something softer if I blinked long enough. My assistant knocked twice to remind me the next client had arrived. I closed the email, told myself she was just venting. At home, I didn't bring it up. Instead, I brought flowers, a bottle of her favorite Cabernet. I made reservations at the Italian place we used to love before the kids were born. She smiled, accepted it all, but said she wasn't hungry. The next morning, I kissed her on the forehead before heading out. You don't have to worry, I said lightly. Once this merger closes, things will settle. We'll have space to breathe again. She nodded, but didn't look up from her coffee. That should have been my clue. Instead, I got in my car and drove downtown, chasing the deal like it was oxygen. Over the next few weeks, the house felt even more distant. Emily stayed in her room more. Jackson barely looked up from his laptop. Laura started leaving early, taking walks alone in the morning, coming home late from errands that never used to take that long. One night, as I was brushing my teeth, her phone buzzed on the counter. I don't make a habit of checking her phone. But something in me, some buried survival instinct, told me to look. It was a text, from a number I didn't recognize. No name attached. Sent the revised docs. Let me know if you want to file before or after Q2. I stared at the screen. Docs? File? Q2? I clicked the message thread open. The last few texts unfolded like a punch to the gut. Mediation is optional, but it might help with custody agreements. If he's not ready to talk, we can proceed without a confrontation. I know this is hard, but you're not alone. Laura had been speaking to a divorce lawyer. Not just speaking, planning, weeks, maybe months. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay beside her in bed, pretending to be asleep while she read in silence. Her breath was calm, even. Mine felt like static. My brain scrambled for a defense. She's just exploring her options. Everyone has a moment of doubt. Maybe she's trying to scare me. Maybe the lawyer's a friend, a cousin, a therapist with poor wording. I didn't believe a word of it. 2 days later, I confronted her. Not with anger, with confusion. Are you thinking about leaving? She looked at me calmly, almost relieved. I've been thinking about it for a long time. Since when? Her eyes didn't flinch. Since before Florida. I felt my stomach drop. You sent me an email, I said. Why didn't you talk to me? Because talking never works with you, she said. You negotiate, you delay, you throw words at problems like confetti and hope it looks like effort. I stood there, unable to speak. I sent the email because I needed something you couldn't interrupt. Something that would sit in your inbox and make you read it twice. And the lawyer? I asked, though I already knew. She hesitated. 2 months ago, just to understand my options, to know what it would look like. I sat down, the weight of it folding me. You really want to end this? She shook her head slowly. I don't want to. I just don't know if I can keep pretending it's a marriage. That word, pretending, hit harder than anything else. I thought I had time. Time to fix it. Time to reverse course. Time to change. But the truth was, she'd been drifting away long before I noticed. And when someone spends that long learning how to live without you, the silence you feel isn't absence. It's rehearsed distance. The conference room was quiet, except for the rustle of papers and the occasional clink of a coffee cup against ceramic. A dozen executives sat around the table, their ties loosened just enough to look human, but their eyes sharp as razors. I stood at the head of the table, suit crisp, voice steady, slides flowing like music. Final valuation at 84.6 million, I said, clicking the last slide. ROI projected at 26% in year 1. Gentlemen, if we move now, we close by end of quarter. There was a pause. Then came the nods, the grins, the outstretched hands. The biggest deal of my career, maybe my life, was done. My managing partner clapped me on the back. James, that was art, pure art. You're about to be legend. I smiled, nodded, shook every hand. Cameras clicked, emails buzzed, my inbox flooded with congratulations, well done, drinks tonight? I slipped out before the toast. I needed air, needed quiet. I told myself I'd call Laura, tell her it was done. Maybe this massive win, would buy me more time, buy us space. I stepped into the elevator, pulled out my phone. 28 missed calls, 14 from Laura, 8 from Jackson, 6 from an unknown number. A chill crawled up my spine. I opened my messages. There was only one. From Laura. We're gone. The kids and I won't be footnotes anymore. I stared at the screen as the elevator kept descending, the numbers blinking past like seconds I couldn't get back. I called her, straight to voicemail. I called again, then again. Nothing. By the time I reached the street, I was sweating through my shirt. The heat outside felt suffocating. My legs moved on autopilot toward the parking garage. I drove home faster than I should have, running red lights, cutting corners. At one point, someone honked and shouted, "You trying to kill someone?" No, I was trying to save something already dying. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked untouched. Lights off, mail still in the box. The same garden gnome Jackson broke and glued back together stood lopsided near the porch, but the front door was unlocked. Inside it was quiet. Still. Eerily so. No cartoons on the TV, no thud of footsteps upstairs, no smell of dinner wafting through the air, just silence. In the kitchen, a note sat on the counter. Not handwritten, printed. I told you, James, this deal was your line in the sand. You crossed it. I ran upstairs, the closet, half empty. The kids' rooms, stripped down, drawers open, clothes gone, favorite stuffed animals missing. The shelves looked abandoned, like someone had moved out in a hurry, or planned it for months. In Emily's room, her desk was cleared, except for one spiral notebook, her journal. I hesitated. Then I opened it. The first page was a drawing, our family, stick figures again. This time, 3 of them had color, faces, smiles. One was gray, no eyes, no mouth, just a tie. Underneath, "This is Daddy. He likes his laptop more than hugs." I flipped the page. More drawings, more words. Then a sentence, boxed in red crayon. "Daddy loves his contracts more than me." I sat on her bed, journal in my lap, unable to move, unable to breathe. I thought of every deal I'd ever closed, every handshake, every bonus. Every night I stayed late, promising I was doing it for them. But what I had built was a shrine to absence. And my daughter, 5 years old, then 6, then 7, had seen through it all. I was her ghost again. No, worse. I was her competitor. I stood and walked back into the hallway. The walls looked different now. Empty, somehow. Like the house had shed its skin, leaving only structure. I found myself in our bedroom, staring at our bed. The sheets were gone. The photos from the nightstand, missing. All that remained was an old postcard from a trip we took to Seattle. On the back, Laura had written, "Let's never be too busy to hold hands." I hadn't read that card in years. Now it felt like a prophecy I had broken. My phone buzzed again. Another congratulatory email. Another LinkedIn notification. I turned it off. Then I sat on the edge of the bed, head in hands, trying to figure out when I stopped being a husband, when I stopped being a father. I couldn't pinpoint it. There wasn't one day. No explosion. No betrayal. Just erosion. One missed dinner. One more flight. One more delay. Until my family was nothing but names in my calendar. Background noise behind a conference call. And now they were gone. Because I had spent so long trying to prove I was worth loving, I forgot to actually love. The silence wasn't just in the walls. It was in the air, the floor, the space between my heartbeats. I walked from room to room like a man underwater, moving slowly, trying to make sense of a world that no longer fit. Emily's room was the hardest. The shelves that once held dolls and glitter crafts were bare. Her desk was empty except for the ring of a missing teacup. The bed, always a messy pile of blankets and stuffed animals, was stripped clean. The only thing left was a faint crayon stain on the wall that read, "Princess Zone." I sank to my knees in the hallway, staring at it. That morning, I had stood in front of the most powerful people I knew, spoken with confidence, controlled the room like a conductor commanding a symphony. Now, I couldn't control the air in my lungs. In our bedroom, Laura's side of the closet was hollow. A few hangers swayed like echoes. The photo on the nightstand, our wedding picture, was face down. The glass had cracked, a long, clean fracture running right through the center of our smiles. It was the most honest image we'd ever taken. I picked it up, my hand trembling. I remembered that day clearly. The scent of her hair, the warmth of her hand in mine, the way she whispered, "We're gonna do this, even when it's hard." And I'd failed her. Not in one massive cinematic betrayal, but in 1,000 small moments I hadn't even noticed. I called her again, straight to voicemail. I left a message this time. "Laura, please, I don't know what to say. I'm home and you're not, and I know this is my fault. I need to hear your voice. Please call me." I didn't expect a response. She was too smart to turn back so easily. Still, I checked my phone every 5 minutes like a desperate teenager waiting for a text after a first date. No calls, no texts, no sounds. By nightfall, I realized I didn't know how to be alone in this house. Not truly alone. I made myself a sandwich I didn't eat. I poured a glass of scotch that sat untouched. I turned on the TV just to kill the quiet. But it didn't help. Every noise made the absence louder. Around 10 p.m., I called Mark, my oldest friend, best man at our wedding, someone who'd been in our lives since before the promotions and business cards. He picked up on the second ring. "You okay?" he asked. No. I didn't say anything else for a long time. Just let the silence carry the weight. Then finally, "She's gone, Mark. Took the kids. Left a note, an email. That's it." He didn't sound surprised. Yeah, he said quietly. She told me she might. I blinked. Wait, what? You knew? I didn't know she'd go through with it. But we've talked. A lot. There was a long pause. How long? Another silence. Then he exhaled. James. She's been crying herself to sleep for 3 years. The words gutted me. No, I said, shaking my head, as if he could see it. No. I would have noticed. I would have. You wouldn't, he said, because you weren't there. I was working. You were gone. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles went white. You think I didn't care? I snapped. I think, Mark said gently but firmly, that you forgot what caring looks like. It was the kind of truth you don't want to hear. The kind that burns its way down like whiskey on an empty stomach. She stopped telling you things, James, he continued. Stopped waiting for you to listen. And the kids, man, they stopped expecting anything. Do you know what that does to a person? To a marriage? I swallowed hard. I thought I was providing. I know, he said, but providing isn't the same as participating. You showed up with gifts. What she needed was presence. What the kids needed was time, not toys. I closed my eyes. All those nights I stayed late at the office, convincing myself that the sacrifice would be worth it, that one day they'd thank me. But no one thanks you for being absent. They just learn to live around the hole you leave. I messed up, I whispered. Mark didn't say anything right away. Then, yeah, you did. And somehow, the honesty felt better than false comfort. But it's not too late to try. Not yet. I hung up the phone and sat there, surrounded by everything I used to think defined success. Big house, leather chairs, imported rugs, a whiskey cart. None of it made a sound. The only voice I could hear was my daughter's. Daddy loves his contracts more than me. And for the first time, I realized what she meant. Not that I didn't love her, but that I hadn't shown her how. The morning after the silence, I woke to the sound of nothing. No feet running across the hallway. No cereal bowls clinking in the kitchen. Just my phone, blinking with unread emails and calendar reminders. Each one a reminder of the life I no longer wanted. At 7:42 a.m., I called my managing partner. He picked up, chipper. James, morning, big day for us, huh? Press wants your quote. I'm not coming in, I said. Silence. You okay? He asked. I'm resigning, effective immediately. There was a pause, then laughter. Wait, what? You're joking. I'm not. James, you just closed the biggest deal of your career, of the firm's history. You're set for life. What the hell are you talking about? I missed my daughter's entire childhood, I said, voice shaking. And I don't know my son. He started to respond, but I ended the call. Then I opened my laptop, typed up an email to the entire executive team. Short, honest. I won't be returning. I'm grateful, but I'm done. I have more important things to rebuild. I'm sorry I couldn't see it sooner. I didn't wait for responses. I powered off the laptop for the first time in years and pushed it into the back of my closet. Then I sat at the kitchen table, grabbed a legal pad, and began writing. Dear Laura, I don't deserve your time. I know that. But I'm not writing to defend myself. I'm writing to acknowledge something I should have said years ago. I failed you. I failed us. You asked me to show up, and I brought paychecks instead of presents. I bought things instead of listening. And worst of all, I thought I was right. I thought someday you'd see the good in all of it. But you saw the cost long before I did. If you ever find it in yourself to let me try, just once, I will come empty-handed and full-hearted. No negotiations, no expectations. Just me, asking for a chance to know our children before they stop wanting to be known. I left the letter unsealed. I didn't want it to feel final, just open. By noon, I was in the car, driving to her mother's house, the only place I could think she'd go. The driveway was familiar. Too familiar. I remembered pulling up here years ago, when Laura and I were just dating. Her dad used to barbecue on weekends. Her mom always greeted us in curlers and slippers. This time I was greeted by the front door not opening. I knocked, waited, knocked again. Finally, the door creaked. Laura stood there, no makeup, tired eyes, her mouth pressed tight. "I got your letter," she said. I nodded, afraid to speak. She stepped outside, closing the door behind her. We stood on the porch like strangers pretending not to remember how we once fit together. "I don't know what you want," she said. "Just to see them. 1 hour. Supervised. I won't talk about us. I just want to say hi. To let them know I'm here." She looked at me for a long time. I didn't beg, didn't plead, just waited. Finally, she nodded once. 1 hour, tomorrow, here. I exhaled. Thank you. The next day, I wore a plain t-shirt and jeans. No watch, no cologne, nothing that screamed old habits. I brought no gifts, just me. Laura opened the door and let me in without a word. The living room looked lived in. Toys, blankets, actual life. Jackson was on the couch, playing a game. Emily sat cross-legged on the floor, drawing. They both looked up when they saw me. "Hey," I said softly. Emily hesitated, then offered a small wave. Jackson nodded. "Hi." Laura sat in the corner, a silent witness. I knelt beside Emily. "What are you drawing?" She shrugged. "A turtle. Looks like a good one." Silence. Then Jackson, still looking at the screen, said, "What's my birthday?" I blinked. "What?" He paused the game, finally turning to look at me. "My birthday. When is it?" I opened my mouth, and nothing came out. I searched my brain, scanned years of calendar invites, work milestones, bonuses, flights, but his birthday wasn't there. February? I tried. He shook his head. November? Another shake. Emily looked down at her turtle. Jackson turned back to the screen. "Thought so." I wanted to cry, wanted to scream, but I just sat there in the wreckage of my own neglect. The hour passed like a lifetime. When it was over, I stood, thanked Laura, and walked out without asking for more. That night, I wrote his birthday on a sticky note and put it on my mirror. And I stared at it until it burned into memory. Because love without presence is forgettable, and I would never forget again. The hardest part wasn't quitting my job. It wasn't giving up the title, the money, or the schedule I'd worn like armor. It was learning how to be present, not just in body, but in spirit. I started small. I cooked breakfast every morning, burnt toast the first few days, over-salted eggs. But Emily giggled when the smoke alarm went off, and Jackson muttered, "At least he's trying." I rode bikes with them through the neighborhood. I bought helmets that actually fit, learned how to adjust the seat on Emily's hand-me-down. We weren't fast, but we were moving together. I offered to drive them to school. At first, they said no. Then, one morning, Jackson tossed his backpack into the passenger seat and said, "Let's see if you even know the route." I did. Barely. But I didn't miss a turn. 3 days later, he let me pick him up too. Laura remained distant, respectful, but cold. She let me in, supervised, and when I overstayed by even 5 minutes, she'd say, "That's enough, James." I offered to help around the house, fix the fence, do laundry, clean gutters. She refused every time. On a Wednesday afternoon, I asked if she'd want to do yoga again, something we used to do together years ago, back when stretching in silence was our version of church. She looked at me like I was insane. "No," she said, sharp. "Not now. Not yet." I asked again 2 weeks later. "No." Third time, I didn't even finish the question before she cut me off. "You don't get to jump the line just because you're finally showing up," she said. I nodded, took the hit, kept going. One morning, she found me kneeling by the garden, pulling weeds. She said nothing, but that night, she left a pair of gloves on the porch rail. Progress in inches. But I still felt her walls. Eventually, I asked gently, "What do you need from me?" She stared at me for a long moment, then said, "Don't try to buy us back. Try showing up." That hit harder than any boardroom takedown I'd ever faced, because that's exactly what I'd done. Try to solve love like a negotiation. Trade apologies for affection. Prove devotion with gestures instead of time. So I stopped asking for credit, and I just kept showing up. I volunteered for carpool duty, attended parent-teacher conferences without being asked, helped Emily with her diorama of a rainforest, even though I glued the monkey upside down. I learned Jackson liked lo-fi music, that he wanted to study computer engineering, that he hated raisins. I learned Emily had a birthmark I'd never noticed, that she hated the color yellow, that her best friend's hamster had just died. I started writing a journal, not for them, for me, to remember, to prove, to myself, that I was awake. After 2 months of this, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic, just a look from Laura that lingered half a second longer. A thank you whispered when I fixed the leaky faucet she'd been ignoring. But it wasn't enough. I needed to do more. Not for them, but for other fathers like me. The ones who'd gone too far down the wrong road and didn't know how to turn back. So I started something. I rented a small room in the local rec center and put up a flyer. Fathers Reconnecting, a safe space to start over. The first meeting had 2 people, me and a nervous guy named Brad, who hadn't seen his kids in 6 months. The second had 5. By the 5th week, we had 15 men, each carrying stories soaked in guilt, shame, confusion. We didn't judge. We listened. We admitted we'd failed. And then we worked. We learned how to be soft, how to say, "I was wrong," without following it with "but." We practiced making lunchboxes, writing birthday cards, planning a day without our phones. One night, I told them everything. About the merger, the email, the drawing with the word ghost. I showed them the sticky note on my phone with Jackson's birthday, and I said, "I used to be proud of forgetting my life for work. Now, I'm terrified of forgetting again." That night, Brad hugged me. A man named Tyrone cried for the first time in years. Another man wrote a letter to his daughter. We weren't perfect, but we were present. And presence, it turns out, is contagious. When Laura found the flyer weeks later, she didn't say anything. She just put it on the fridge with a magnet, right next to Emily's turtle drawing. The first spark came on a rainy Thursday. I had just finished setting up chairs for that week's Fathers Reconnecting group when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Laura. Not long, just one line. "Emily needs help with her school project. You available?" I stared at the screen like it was a trick question. Was I available? I was always available now. I replied immediately. "Of course. What time?" That evening, Laura dropped Emily off at my apartment, a small, modest place I'd rented just outside of town. It smelled like old coffee and hope. Emily walked in, holding a cardboard box and a bag of craft supplies. "It's for science," she said, setting it all on the table. "We're supposed to make a habitat." I pulled out the instructions, reading through them carefully while she sorted felt leaves and plastic animals. "Why didn't you ask Mom?" I asked gently. "She's busy with work stuff," Emily said, "but I told her you could help." I smiled. "Because I'm good with glue guns?" She shrugged. "Because I thought you'd care." That hit harder than it should have, not because it was sweet, but because it had once been unimaginable that she'd trust me with anything. We spent 3 hours constructing a rainforest. We painted trees, glued vines, created a pond using tinfoil and food coloring. I let her take the lead, even when she insisted frogs could be purple. When we finished, she beamed. "It's good, right?" "It's better than good," I said. "It's the best cardboard rainforest I've ever seen." She hugged me before she left. Not a quick, polite hug, a real one. Arms tight around my ribs, face buried in my shirt. I closed my eyes and didn't let go until she did. The next week was Thanksgiving. Laura texted again, short, neutral. "If you want to join us for baking Thursday morning, you can." I read the message twice. She didn't say family. She didn't say come home, but she said join us. And that was enough. I showed up early, nervous. I wore the same flannel shirt I used to wear on lazy Sundays, hoping it still meant something. Jackson opened the door. "Mom's in the kitchen," he said, already halfway back to his game console. But Emily ran to me, holding out her apron. "You have to wear this." It was pink and said "Kiss the Cook." I put it on without protest. Laura was by the counter, sifting flour. She glanced at me, gave a quick nod. "There's a bowl for you." We didn't talk much at first. The kitchen buzzed with instructions and laughter, and the kind of chaos that only comes from people who used to move around each other like dancers and were learning the steps again. Emily measured poorly. Jackson insisted on too much cinnamon. I cracked eggs with one hand just to show off, and they mocked me when I got shell in the batter. Laura smiled, just once, but I saw it, and I filed it away like a precious artifact. We baked 3 pies, one of which collapsed in the oven. Emily named it the volcano. After the kitchen was clean and the pies cooling, I offered to run out for coffee. Laura hesitated, then handed me her old reusable mug, the one with the faded sticker from our honeymoon in Maine. I drove to the coffee shop like I was carrying gold. When I came back, she took the cup and said, almost absently, "I smiled today." I looked at her, caught off guard. "You did," I said. She didn't meet my eyes. "You didn't earn me back," I nodded. "I know. But you earned that." That. One smile, one unguarded moment. One piece of a puzzle I wasn't trying to finish all at once. And it was enough. That night, after the kids had gone upstairs, I lingered near the door. Laura didn't tell me to stay, but she didn't rush me out either. She walked me out to the porch like she used to when we were dating. It was quiet, crisp, the sky full of stars. "Do you remember our first Thanksgiving?" she asked. I smiled. "You burned the green beans. And you tried to cut the turkey with a steak knife." We laughed softly. For a moment it felt like something old had cracked open just enough to let something new in. "I'm not asking for anything," I said. "Not tonight. Not ever, if you're not ready." She looked at me, her face unreadable. Then she reached into her pocket and handed me something. A folded piece of paper. I unfolded it. It was a printout of the father's reconnecting flyer. "Emily found this on the fridge," she said. She said, "I think Dad's helping other dads now." "I'm trying," I said. You are. She didn't promise more, didn't invite me back, but she didn't take the flyer off the fridge either. I drove home with cinnamon in my beard and hope in my chest. It wasn't a comeback. It wasn't redemption. It was just presence. And that was where healing begins. It was Laura's idea, which is what surprised me most. A short trip, she said one evening while I was helping Emily with her reading homework. Just the four of us. No big expectations. I looked up. You want me to come? She nodded, carefully neutral. If you want to. I said yes before she finished the sentence. We chose a state park 2 hours north. Jackson liked the idea of hiking trails. Emily was excited about s'mores and a cabin. I was just grateful for the invitation. We packed light, just one overnight. Enough snacks to survive a week. Flashlights, board games, mismatched sleeping bags. The kind of trip we used to plan in our 20s, before the kids, when spontaneity felt romantic instead of risky. It didn't go smoothly, not even close. An hour into the drive, the old SUV Laura borrowed from her sister started to sputter. We pulled over on the shoulder while Jackson Googled car sounds that mean death. It's probably the alternator, he said, peering under the hood like an expert. I called roadside assistance. 2-hour wait. We sat in the car, windows down, breeze cutting through the silence. Then Emily started singing. Off-key, loud, intentionally silly. I'm stuck on the road with my whole weird family. Jackson groaned. Please stop. She didn't. She added verses, made up a rap. I joined in with a chorus. Laura rolled her eyes, but I saw the corners of her mouth twitch. When the tow truck arrived, the driver offered to take us back. Laura surprised everyone, including herself, when she said, Can you take us to the campsite instead? The man shrugged. Sure. I've done worse. We all piled in, laughter trailing behind us like a flag. The cabin was basic, 2 rooms, 1 bathroom, creaky floorboards, but it was dry, and the kids didn't complain. Jackson claimed the top bunk. Emily made a pillow fort. That night, it rained, hard. The firewood was damp. The stove in the cabin wouldn't light. Dinner was peanut butter sandwiches and half-melted trail mix. And yet, no one complained. We played Uno on the floor until midnight. Jackson won every round and gloated like a champ. Emily kept trying to play 2 cards at once. Laura laughed harder than I'd seen in years. And me, I didn't check my phone once. No emails, no alerts, no temptation to escape. Just us. Imperfect, messy, real. At some point, lightning flashed outside. The kids squealed. We all jumped into one bed and watched shadows dance on the ceiling. I forgot how loud thunder is out here, Laura whispered. I forgot how safe it used to feel, I replied. We didn't touch, didn't fall into old rhythms, but her head tilted slightly toward mine, and for a moment, we breathed in sync. In the morning, the rain had stopped, but the road was muddy. The tow company wouldn't be able to retrieve the SUV until noon, so we hiked instead. Mud squelched under our boots. Emily fell twice and got up laughing. Jackson took pictures of bugs. Laura held the map upside down until we were completely off trail, and no one cared. It wasn't a vacation. It was an experience. We reached a clearing and laid out the one dry blanket, ate crushed granola bars and bruised apples, talked about nothing, laughed about everything. It felt like a first date, awkward, hopeful, new. On the way back, Laura and I walked behind the kids. You did good, she said softly. This weekend. I looked at her, unsure what to say. It's not always going to be this lucky. She smiled. That's the point, isn't it? We did everything wrong and still had more fun than half our perfect trips. I didn't think you'd ever ask me to join you again. I didn't think I would either. She paused, then added, but people can change. That night, back home, I dropped the kids off and started to leave. Laura followed me to the porch, holding something in her hand. Her phone. I didn't mean to show you this, she said, but I think maybe you should know. She pulled up my contact. It read, James, Dad's back, I swallowed. You changed it? A while ago. I looked at her. Is that a question or a statement? She gave a half smile. I haven't decided yet. That was enough, because names matter, words matter. But that question mark, that tiny flickering maybe, meant everything. It meant she noticed, that she saw me trying. And in that uncertainty, there was more hope than I'd had in years. I walked away that night without answers, but with something better. An opening, a crack in the wall, a fragile brick of trust, set by both our hands. The auditorium buzzed with the low hum of conversation. Rows of chairs filled with business professionals, aspiring entrepreneurs, and young executives eager for secrets to success. I stood behind the curtain, adjusting the lapel mic clipped to my collar, heart pounding in a way I hadn't felt since my early days pitching impossible ideas in boardrooms. But this wasn't a pitch. This was a reckoning. The host introduced me. Our next speaker is a former investment executive, founder of the Fathers Reconnecting Initiative, and someone who learned the value of time over money. James Halbrook. Applause. A spotlight. I stepped onto the stage. The room looked smaller than it had from the wings. Or maybe I was just seeing it differently now. I took a breath. When I was 35, I began, I wanted to be the man who could close a deal with one hand and answer emails with the other. I chased titles, bonuses, recognition. A few chuckles from the crowd. Heads nodding. I got what I wanted. But I lost everything I didn't realize I'd already had. I paused. Let that settle. My daughter once drew a picture of our family with 3 smiling people. I was in the corner, a gray outline labeled Daddy the Ghost. Silence. My son once asked me his own birthday, and I couldn't answer. Not because I didn't love him, but because I hadn't made space to know him. I told them about the merger, the missed graduation, the night the house was empty, the sticky note on my mirror, the cardboard rainforest. But this isn't a story about regret, I said. It's a story about presence, about earning your way back, one humble step at a time. I told them how I resigned, how I showed up with burnt pancakes and mismatched socks, how I listened more than I talked, how I stopped trying to win and started trying to witness. You can build empires, I said, but don't destroy homes in the process, because no stock price, no IPO, no quarterly win can hug you back when the lights go out. The audience was still. One woman wiped a tear. A young man leaned forward, elbows on knees. I ended with this. If your phone rings right now, and it's your kid or your spouse, and you think, I'll call them back later, ask yourself, will later still be there? Applause this time was thunderous. I stepped off stage lighter than I'd felt in years. 2 weeks later, Jackson graduated high school. The ceremony was outside, on a football field beneath a clear sky. Rows of folding chairs, proud parents, awkward gowns. He walked across the stage tall, confident, every bit a young man I barely recognized from 2 years ago, but one I had slowly come to know again. After the ceremony, we stood together near the bleachers. He handed me a small, neatly wrapped box. Here, he said. I had this made. I opened it, a brown leather wallet, simple and worn in, with something engraved on the inside flap. Thanks for choosing me. I didn't speak. Couldn't. Just pulled him into a hug that said more than any words ever could. That night, I sat on the porch with Laura. The kids were inside, arguing over movie choices. Emily had discovered 80s comedies and wouldn't stop quoting lines she barely understood. Laura sipped tea. I watched the stars. I got a call yesterday, I said quietly. She raised an eyebrow. The firm, I added. They want me back. Partner, double the salary, flexible schedule, full control. She didn't react. I waited, then added, I said no. She looked at me now. You did? I nodded. I told them if they'd called 2 years ago, I'd have said yes before they finished the offer. But now, I gestured toward the house where Emily was laughing and Jackson was pretending not to. I'd be trading this for that, and I'm not going back. Laura smiled faintly. You finally stopped measuring worth in percentages. I finally learned what value really is. We sat in silence for a while. Not heavy, not awkward, just quiet. The kind of silence that only exists between people who have broken and rebuilt. I still don't know where we're headed, I said. She nodded. Me neither. But I'm here. Every step. I know. Inside, Emily called out, Dad, hurry up, movie's starting. Dad, not James, not the ghost, not the stranger. Dad. I stood up, smiled at Laura, and walked back inside. The snow fell in slow, heavy flakes as we pulled into the community center parking lot. Emily pressed her face to the window, eyes wide with excitement. Jackson was quieter, earbuds in, but he hadn't rolled his eyes or complained once, and that, in teenage language, was practically a love letter. Laura sat beside me in the front seat, bundled in her favorite red scarf, the same one she'd worn on our first Christmas together, back when we'd lived on ramen and shared a futon in a studio apartment. She caught me staring and raised an eyebrow. What? I smiled. You still look good in that scarf. She smirked. It's the only thing I still fit into from that year. We laughed, a soft sound under the gentle tap of snow on the windshield. Then we stepped out together. Inside, the center buzzed with life. Volunteers sorting canned goods, children decorating cookies, an elderly man dressed as Santa handing out plastic candy canes with exaggerated ho-ho-hos. Our family was assigned to Station 4, distributing coats and gloves. Jackson handled sizing. Emily organized colors. Laura greeted people at the door with warm smiles and hot cocoa. I helped the kids try on jackets, adjusting zippers and tightening drawstrings, listening to stories about how they liked blue more than black, and why dinosaurs were cooler than superheroes. Somewhere between the 5th and 10th coat, I stopped and looked around. Jackson was helping a younger boy put on gloves, showing him how to make a snowball-ready fist. Emily was deep in conversation with a girl her age, their heads close as they laughed. Laura caught my eye and waved. It hit me, not like a sudden jolt, but like a slow realization that your heartbeat has finally found rhythm. We were a family, not perfect, not healed in every way, but whole. Mid-afternoon, a woman with a camera approached. Hi, I'm with the Hudson Valley Chronicle, she said. We're doing a feature on families volunteering together. Would you mind if we snapped a photo? Laura looked at me, then at the kids. Sure, she said. We stood in front of the donation table, Jackson trying not to smile, Emily striking a pose, Laura's hand brushing against mine before settling there, fingers intertwined. The photographer snapped 3 pictures. Click, click, click. And just like that, we became the cover story. The issue came out a week later. Hope in action, local families giving back this holiday season. There we were, centered on the front page, smiling together. The headline read, "Once broken, now bonded, one family's story of redemption." I taped it to the fridge, not out of pride, out of gratitude. That night, while Laura and I cleaned up the kitchen, Emily ran in holding a piece of folded paper. "Can I read you something?" she asked. We both turned. She cleared her throat, her voice small but sure. "Hi, it's from my writing assignment at school. We had to write a letter we'd never sent." She unfolded the page. "Dear Dad, for a long time, I didn't know how to feel about you. You were the guy who missed everything, the guy who always had somewhere else to be. I used to think work was your real family, and we were just extra. But then you started showing up, not with gifts, but with time. You helped with my science project. You made pancakes that tasted weird but looked fun. You came to my play even when you had a fever. And I saw it. I saw you trying. And I saw Mom smiling again. So I want you to know, I'm proud to call you Dad again. Love, Emily." The room went quiet. Laura had tears in her eyes. Jackson looked up from his phone and said, "It's a good letter." I knelt, arms open, and Emily ran into them. It wasn't a grand finale. No confetti, no fireworks, just a girl choosing love, choosing forgiveness. And that was more than enough. Later that week, I got another email from my old firm. The subject line, "One more offer." They'd sweetened the deal again. An even higher salary, better hours, a role that gave me complete control and flexibility. I didn't even open the full message. I hit delete. Then I went back to baking cookies with Emily, who had just discovered snickerdoodles. We spent Christmas Eve watching It's a Wonderful Life as a family. Laura fell asleep with her head on my shoulder. Jackson snored softly from the recliner. Emily curled up at our feet like a cat. And I realized something simple and profound. All those years I spent chasing power, I thought success meant being the man people envied. But the real win was being the man my family could count on. 1 month later, Laura handed me a new journal. Inside the cover, she'd written, "We can't undo the past, but we can still write a better next chapter." And so we did. Together.